Hi everyone. You might have noticed that Quake speedrunners like to occasionally press the jump button. Bunny hops might be a speedrunning staple, but how would we cope if we had our most powerful technique taken away? Quake wasn't exactly a platformer, but it did make heavy use of its groundbreaking 3D environments, and there were a lot of areas in the game where jumping was necessary to progress. The idea of a no-jump speedrun has been floated before in the community, but before discussing it with other runners, I thought it would be fun to do a blind playthrough on my own to see whether it was even possible to complete the game, and to see how many new or unique tricks I could discover. This is Quake in 0 presses, 0 spacebar presses. I gave myself 2 basic rules for this challenge. 1. Absolutely no pressing jump under any circumstances. And 2. Try to include as many speedrunning skips and shortcuts as possible, no matter how many quick saves it takes. The first thing I had to do was some serious muscle memory de-training. 2 decades of playing Quake and other FPS games means that my thumb hits the spacebar before my brain can tell it not to. At first, I bound the spacebar to restart the level as a punishment, but I immediately regretted that and instead settled for a simpler solution. After realizing that selecting hard skill is impossible, I headed down the easy skill hallway and into the first episode. E1M1 was about as straightforward as it gets, just strolling along the intended path to the exit. I grabbed the SSG and nail gun along the way, thinking they might come in handy. E1M2 was simple as well. When I got to this room to do the standard bunny across to the silver key, I realized that of course I'd have to extend the bridge as the game intended. And before I exited, I decided to grab the armor from this secret in case I could do some boosts in the next maps. E1M3 has probably the most famous grenade jump in the game, but without the jump, explosives only push you a fraction of the usual height or distance. Reaching the top level here seemed hopeless, so again I just cruised through the intended route. At least I could do the zombie skip at the end, luring this guy into these closing bars and then teleporting to the exit. E1M4 was a map I had high hopes for. I figured a well-timed boost from this slope might let me make it to the silver key, skipping most of the map. But despite getting very close, I just couldn't quite seem to make it. I then wondered if I could use this knight at the beginning for a double boost. First I decided to grab the armor hidden in this secret. Then I had to make sure it didn't squash the knight on the way down. Then I lured him onto the ledge, and voila, a double boost to the silver key. I finished the level, but then wondered, what about the even bigger skip on this map, the slope grenade jump directly up to the exit? There were a couple of knights here too. Could I potentially do a double boost all the way to the top? This one took a lot of attempts and a lot of luck. You need to place the first grenade into position, then have the knight walk towards you, and then fire the second grenade to hit the knight just as you reach the peak of the slope, and just as the first grenade explodes. It was an extremely tricky boost, but eventually I made it to the top. Doing this skip this early on gave me a lot of hope about the challenge as a whole, and it immediately made me go back to the previous level and revisit the game's first grenade boost. Could I lure a zombie into position on this ledge and then double boost my way up to the top floor? Again, the setup was tricky, but it worked in the end. 2 boosts were just enough to compensate for the lack of 1 jump. Things were looking good. On to E1M5. I thought it might be smart to grab the mega health at the start, but of course I then got foiled by these tiny ledges and I had to grenade boost up the stairs. Still, I made a tiny net health gain. I grabbed the rocket launcher and thought I could make use of the secret quad for some boosts, but of course I didn't have enough health. This yellow armor looked very tempting, so I waited for the quad to run out and then tried slope boosting to the ledge. If I dropped down here to get the armor, then I had to rocket boost back out again, defeating the purpose of the armor. So I carefully grabbed it while staying on the small ledge. Once I got to this area with enough health and armor, I could use 2 combined grenade plus rocket boosts to reach the gold key door at the top. Again, I figured the secret armor here would come in handy in the next maps. E1M6 has one of the simplest skips in the game, and while I can't bunny across to the gold key, a couple of rocket boosts did the trick. On E1M7, I did another double boost up to the top level, and with that, the first episode was done. So far so good. On to episode 2, and I already had a plan to grab the secret grenade launcher as soon as possible. All most people do on this map is jump straight to the exit across this gap, so I got a bit lost at first. What does this map even look like? Did I just soft lock myself here? Oh okay, the bars open back up after a minute. I grabbed the red armor, then grabbed the grenade launcher and the pentagram. An easy double grenade boost up to the exit area from this enforcer. It was all a bit more complicated than the 6-second world record, but good enough for me. The fact that I already have the grenade launcher on the first map makes me very confident that I won't fail the challenge in episode 2. On E2M2, I think about boosting up to this ledge somehow, but then just decide to take the easy way up the stairs. I grab the quad without thinking, but that turns out to be a mistake, foiled by a small gap and a lack of health. I restart, skip the quad and boost over the gap, and from there it's just the standard route to the exit. I thought E2M3 might be a headache, and I was right. Normally, a single grenade jump is all you need to boost directly up to the exit area. At first I thought I could lure this ogre over for a double, but it's too fat to fit through this archway, and I couldn't get enough of a boost from back on this bridge. I start to wonder if I can set up a triple boost. 1 on the ground, a second bounce towards him, and a third up close. I try this for a while and get really close a few times, but I just can't seem to make it work. I then spot these zombies and decide to painstakingly lure them across the bridge into position for a double boost. Of course, while trying to make this shortcut work, I could have finished the map a dozen times using the standard route, but that's not the point, is it? Eventually the zombie gets into position, and after a bit of confusion as to the best grenade setup, I manage to double boost up to the top and exit the map. On E2M4, I already have a plan as well. I knew I was getting the rocket launcher on this map, so I wanted to boost up onto this ledge, grab the pentagram from the secret area, and then rocket boost to my heart's content. It took a few tries to quad boost up here without taking too much damage. I grabbed this secret mega health so I could then quad boost again up to the pentagram. I know I could have just skipped the quad and used double boosts instead, but I want the quad damage style points. Once I had the rocket launcher, I had fun boosting through the map, only to be killed at the very last second by this fiend. I then realized I hadn't saved my game in this level properly, so I had to do it all again. Anyway, on to E2M5. Here I started with the standard route, extending this bridge, then walking back around to cross it. I needed to make my way up to the top of these platforms to the elevator. You can skip the elevator by blocking it as it descends, but this takes a lot of health and armor, so I tried to save as much as I could while still doing 2 double boosts up to the top. I just barely survived the elevator block, only to realize I didn't have enough health to do the next skip I wanted, a boost from this slope towards the gold key. Normally you can do a very light rocket jump and a bunny on this thin ledge, but here I knew I had to have enough health for 2 separate boosts. I restarted the level, this time taking even more care to spare health on my way up to the elevator. I placed this grenade lower on the ground to take less damage, and I realized that with a perfect boost and a bit of extra speed from a pre-strafe up the slope, I could just barely boost up to the top level with a single rocket. After blocking the elevator and grabbing the extra health packs along the way, I had enough HP left for a fairly stylish double boost across to the gold key. Even now my jumping reflex was still occasionally kicking in. Just before I exited the map, I remembered that there was red armor in this secret area, so I went back and grabbed it before heading to E2M6. For the final level in episode 2, I figured that the usual skip to the long elevator wouldn't be a problem, even with a single rocket boost. There's not much to report on this map. Wait in this nook to avoid spawning enemies, some extra boosts to grab the rune, then we're done and on to episode 3. E3M1 was an interesting map. Obviously I wasn't going to be able to do the famous curling slope jump here to skip to the gold key. But as I started playing through normally, I remembered that this room is also connected to the key area above. Was there any way I could use these exploding boxes to boost up there? This turned out to be a painful exercise. Hitting the boxes from the ground did nothing. At first I tried curling from this slope. No luck. Then I tried for much too long to lure one of these grunts into a position where I could fall on its head and surf over onto one of the boxes. Still no luck. Eventually I realized that there's also something strange about these 2 boxes. From many positions you don't take any damage from them. After a ton of attempts and restarts, I gave up and accepted that this was one of the rare maps where I would just have to trudge along the intended route. Luckily, on E3M2, I could go straight back to using skips. A pattern was emerging. A single grenade wasn't enough to skip the trigger, which lowered the silver key, but a double boost using one of these zombies did the trick. I thought for a second about trying to set up another double boost out of this pit, but the monsters were chaotic and it only saved a second or 2, so I just took the teleporter instead. On E3M3, I lured this ogre into position and hit this double boost to the top platform on my first try. The second half of the map is cramped and full of enemies, so I was happy just to make it through alive. At the start of E3M4, I stocked up on health and surprised myself by landing this fish boost out of the water first try as well. I'd never actually done the trick before, and I'd only seen it in speedrunning projects and marathon runs. But then I realized that this boost also skipped the rocket launcher, which I knew I'd need later on. I restarted and took the standard route, opening up this central area and then rocket boosting over to the elevator where I landed from the earlier fish boost. From there I just do another couple of rocket boosts across these platforms, then follow the regular path to the exit. On E3M5 I knew the rocket launcher would be invaluable. Remember this message from the wind tunnels? A rocket boost would have to do instead. This map's major skip involves hitting a trigger at the edge of this pipe in order to lower this barrier protecting the next wind tunnel. Yet again, a double boost was just enough to do the trick. It's lucky I have good timing with grenade explosions. These kinds of boosts became my go-to approach throughout the challenge. After this skip, it's another straight ahead path to the exit, rocket boosting up into the wind tunnels as necessary. At the start of E3M6, I decided to drop down to the red armor and double boost back up for a net gain of HP. I also grabbed the Ring of Shadows before doing a small boost here and heading towards the silver key. From there it was yet another double boost to the gold key, then through the exit area, failing style points by adding this completely useless boost at the end. That was it for episode 3. Episode 4's first map was over in a flash. I hadn't done the starting curl trick for a decade or two, so I needed a few attempts there. But after that, it was smooth sailing. In fact, this map is probably the only one where a jumpless attempt can almost match the world record speedrun time. I was feeling extremely confident that I was going to breeze through the rest of this challenge. But then I hit E4M2. When I got to this area, I had the first real moment of being truly stumped. This room is one of the more platformer-style sections in the game, where you need to make it up to this ledge after shooting the window. They're only small jumps, but I have no explosives, and there's only a single ogre here. Ogre grenades barely lift you off the ground if you don't jump, so I spent some time looking for a potential setup for a double ogre boost, but even that didn't seem like it was going to do the trick. I restarted and grabbed the pentagram so I could make some random attempts and get shot in the face a bunch of times. It was looking hopeless until by pure chance, this shambler from much earlier in the level wandered into the room. At first, I thought he might zap me across this gap if I could boost onto the rails from the ogre. But then I had an even better idea. All of these sloped surfaces seemed like they might have the potential to set up the shambler's big melee attack. If I could get the right angle above it, then maybe it could boost me all the way to the window? Again, I tried a whole bunch of different setups which weren't looking promising, but eventually I found the angle, luring it into this nook and using the slope to time a jump. At first I made it onto the closer platform and tried to get zapped across to the window, but then when that didn't work, I tried a direct boost the whole way. After 100 or so quick saves and some painfully close attempts, I finally hit the trick. I confidently continued along the path, getting ready for the curling bunny into the exit, when I had the biggest facepalm moment of the whole run. I was so focused on the crazy shambler trick that I forgot that the end jump required, well, a jump. I hadn't collected the silver key and couldn't finish the map. And getting the silver key required, you guessed it, more platform-style jumping. Luckily, I could adapt my strategy with the shambler. I restarted and used it instead to boost up here so I could grab the key. I then ran around the level and had to do the first boost all over again. Another 100 or so quick saves later, I finally did the second boost again and headed to the exit, this time with the key in hand. I was hoping the worst might be over, but the next map had its own set of puzzles. Normally you skip half the level with a tiny slope jump up to this platform. I figured it must be possible to get a helping hand from this fiend, but for some reason I just couldn't get it to work. No amount of curling or surfing was doing the trick, and I couldn't get it to lunge at me from the right angle. I gave up and tried the normal route, only to be met by a familiar nemesis, this tiny platform. Again, no explosives, and I was struggling to come up with a way to make it. I thought this fiend might come in handy. Maybe I could surf across somehow? Or maybe I could bait it into a lunge attack? Nothing was working. I dropped down and was again reminded of how little height you get from a single ogre grenade. But this time I figured a double might work. The problem was finding the right setup. Many failed attempts later, I managed this gigantic double boost. Relieved, I made my way to the next area, grabbed the grenade launcher, and immediately got stuck in this tiny grave. I'd forgotten to save again, so I redid the double boost, took the quad, and fell in the ditch again like a moron. Try again, but I forgot about this tiny bar, so I failed a couple of quad boosts over it. Restart, don't take the quad, and do a normal boost over this enormous barrier. Things are looking up again. A stylish little low damage quad boost across this gap. Grab the key, grenade boost back over the same gap, grab the next key and head to the exit, adding a couple of completely useless boosts along the way. Now I feel like I have the challenge in the bag. I have the grenade launcher again, and I don't think there are any surprises left which an explosion or two can't solve. On E4M4, it took a while to convince this fiend to help, but eventually I could set up a double grenade boost around this corner. The pentagram came in handy while taking about 1 million damage to the face. E4M5 took 30 seconds to beat, jumping over this gap with a precise single boost. E4M6 was fun. I grabbed the quad and pentagram and boosted with a grenade from the water to grab the rocket launcher. I then did some shockingly bad rocket boosts to finish the level. And E4M7 was fun as well. The now standard grenade plus rocket combo up here, stroll through the map's corridors and staircases to this hub area, which also has a quad and pentagram, and then a few more low quality boosts to finish the map. All that was left was to casually walk through the game's final level and hop into the teleporter to finish the challenge. And there you have it. It's officially possible to beat Quake without pressing jump a single time. It took some creative thinking and a lot of quick saves, but it can be done. This was just a single playthrough, and I have no doubt that there are all kinds of additional strats available. Maybe some of you watching have already seen the potential for smarter routes or cooler shortcuts, and I wonder if anyone out there would be mad enough to try it in a single segment. Let me know what you think, and if there are any other types of challenges you'd like me to try. Thanks for listening, and see you later.